Welcome to AP Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Al Pilong, CEO of AP Leadership Partners, an executive coaching practice centered around a passion for effective leadership. There are two things I know for sure about leadership. First, leadership is hard. And second, leadership matters. And so my hope today is that through the course of this conversation, you will find fresh ideas and inspiration for your challenging but important leadership journey ahead. Thanks for listening. The AP Leadership Podcast is sponsored by CXO Coaching, an executive coaching firm focused on empowering leaders and driving results. And now, let's get started. Today's guest is someone I've had the privilege of working closely with and someone I've learned a great deal from over the years. Dr. Loraine Frank-Lightfoot is currently the Vice President and Triad Region Chief Nursing Executive at Novant Health. I first worked with Loraine at Munson Healthcare, where I hired her as the Chief Nursing Officer for Munson Medical Center. She's deeply respected for how she develops leaders, builds strong teams, and drives quality and safety in meaningful ways. Loraine, thanks for taking the opportunity to join me today.
And thank you, Al. I'm honored with the very kind introduction.
Well, it's all well-deserved. So before we get into conversation about leadership, maybe share something beyond your resume about yourself or anything interesting for our audience.
I grew up on a farm, and I have about 100 first cousins. Where I grew up, if you were smart and you were a girl, they suggested teacher or nurse. And I don't like small children all that much, so that's how I went into nursing. But I think that, education has been a way, not only for me, but for so many, to raise the standard of living for their families. And that's one of the things I do at Novant Health is lead our system retention committee. And one of the things that we've done through that group that I am just thrilled with is something called Future Forward, which is allowing our employees guidance counselor access and access to education that really is at no cost. I think education is just the key to how do you get ahead in life?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, very good. Well, thanks for sharing that. 100 first cousins. That's pretty impressive. All right, well, let's jump into some conversation around leadership. The first question is, why don't you share with us the most impactful leader in your career?
When I think back to all the people that I've worked with, and especially when I think about nursing leaders, there was my chief nurse when I was a director at Akron General. Her name was Joan Westman. She's since passed. Joan was very forceful and always led with what was the important thing for the patient. And said, if we do the right thing for the patient and the right thing for the team member, we're always going to do the right thing for the organization. So she's one of those leaders that always had your back. I can think of several times when I did something stupid, and she would hop on it and defend me and then turn around and say, don't ever do that again. So when I think about what kind of leader I want to be, is someone like her that, I have the back of my frontline leaders, I have the back of my directors, my chief nurses, and also able to have that softer side and really understand where they're coming from. Also, one thing that she did extremely well was challenging the status quo. One of the things I hate hearing from folks is, well, we've always done it that way. Because just because you've always done it that way doesn't mean it's not stupid. Things change over time and we have to adapt. And so I think often see people where what would Jesus do? I always interpret those as what would Joan do? Because it really is thinking about how she led and how she inspired me to be a leader who was courageous and was willing to take a risk if it was the right thing for the patient and the team.
Yeah. Sounds like she was tough, but she understood the soft side. She was willing to challenge. Yeah. It sounds like she had a pretty balanced approach to leadership, which I see in you as well.
Yeah, she certainly did. But when you heard her heels coming down the hall, she struck some fear in people's hearts.
Yeah. But, it's okay as long as you also know that they care about you in the end.
Right.
So is there a leadership quote that is a favorite for you? And if so, why?
It's from a leader that I worked with for about 15 years at two different organizations. And he always said, nothing is ever as good or as bad as it seems. And so from that, a lot of times people, and I tell this to my managers all the time, especially as a newer manager or newer director, when people bring things to you that are of concern, your initial reaction is sometimes like, oh my gosh, that's so terrible.
Yeah.
And his guidance was always, take a breath. Let's dig into it. It may be really good or it may be really bad, but let's get the facts and let's not react to it. And I think oftentimes people can be very reactionary. And I try not to be a reactionary leader. And
Yeah, the idea of guarding against being a person that is reactionary to circumstances, how do you keep yourself from not reacting or overreacting?
well, you take that internal breath, and pause and kind of reset yourself. And then I like the tell me more.
Yeah,
What else do you know about it? Where'd you
yeah,
hear this?
yeah.
How do we need to investigate? What exactly is the situation? And there clearly are times when things really seem very bad, and sometimes they are bad, but you can't react to that. You have to keep your cool
Yeah,
because the minute you panic,
yeah,
then your team's going to panic. And so, as goes the leader, so goes the team.
yeah, no doubt. How about the other side of that quote? Things are never as good as they seem. How does that come into play?
Sometimes, you think you got an award or you had a good story. I guess there's a lot more of the things are not as bad as they seem,
Yeah.
but things aren't as good as they seem. Usually, because sometimes we're in such a challenging environment where we don't see a lot of good, most of
Mm,
it seems to be bad or negative, that you have to celebrate the good,
yes.
and the positive. And I think to make sure that you're really taking that back to the team that made it happen. And it's good to make sure that you're celebrating those kinds of wins.
Yeah, because I mean, the work that we do is hard. Leadership is hard, and the negative is always in front of you. But if you can balance that with some celebration of the good things, and sometimes you have to remind yourself that it's not all bad. There are some really good things happening along the way that are worthy of celebration. I have to tell myself that a lot just to be grateful and thankful and appreciate the positive, not always look at the glass half empty like I tend to do.
Well, and I tend to look at the glass as half full.
All
I'm
right.
much more of an optimist than a pessimist. Although people do kind of beat you down over the years with
Yeah.
with some of the challenges, as
Yeah.
you and I have certainly discussed many
Yeah.
times.
Sometimes in my career, I wondered if there was even a glass.
Yeah, I see you there, Al, or maybe it's just a tiny little glass,
Yeah, shot glass.
a shot glass.
All right. So let's talk about bravery and confidence and how they play into good leadership from your perspective and your experience.
Well, you have to stand up for what you believe is right, even if it may be unpopular. And I certainly have done that in my career. It led me to part ways with an organization one time because it really was about doing what was right and what was ethical. And you have to live with yourself. So I try and surround myself with leaders who are like-minded in that way where it really is about the patient. It is about quality and safety. And if we do the right things and we support each other, then we're going to have the outcomes that we want for our patients and our communities. But I think a lot of times that takes courage. It takes bravery to stand up to people, especially when there's a power gradient.
Yes.
I can recall one conversation I had with a system CEO. We were kind of nose to nose, and I joked that I can still feel the spittle on my face from that conversation with him where I was making him very angry. But ultimately, we did the right thing for the patient. And so that takes courage and conviction
Yes.
to know that what you're doing and what you're promoting is the right thing. And I have a really strong sense of right and wrong. And I think that's helped me a lot along my leadership journey. And there's a lot of gray in the world too. But when it comes to doing the right thing for patients or doing the right thing for the team, there's usually less gray.
Yeah. And you're a very values driven leader. You look at the big picture and try to make thoughtful decisions. And when you don't see others making thoughtful decisions or making decisions that impact you or your team, that's where you stand up, is what I've observed.
Yeah. I am usually people may be uncomfortable with things. And so I've been working in the South now for 6 years. People are a little less outspoken than in the Midwest. And there are times when everyone is thinking the same thing, but no one wants to be the squeaky wheel that says it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's probably one of the roles I fill most within our executive nursing leadership team is I'm that squeaky wheel. And you say something and then I start getting all these text messages. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
But it takes courage. And I think sometimes some of that comes with age too.
Well, experience, age, and sort of being driven and leading through principles. that are important to you. And when those principles are compromised, you tend to stand up and as a good leader should. It also requires confidence. And so there's bravery and there's also confidence. Tell me what you think about where does confidence play into your leadership?
Well, I think confidence because if you have a successful track record of doing the right thing or being right, it gives you more confidence. And I think that started back when I was even in high school. I'm the oldest of five. And so always the leader. So if you're leading your younger sisters through the woods, you have to be confident that you know where you're going. In high school, knowing the right answer, being able to solve the problem gives you confidence. I think, and that carried through in college and in my first job. Like when you start building success upon success, or you're doing the right things, or I mean, I've had so many wonderful mentors along the way who have, helped me with my career and said, you are doing the right things. That was the correct thing to do. That helps you build your confidence. And then I think I don't even think about it anymore, to be
Yeah.
honest. Once you get to a certain point in your career, you've done it so many times. You've cooked the dish so many times that when it comes up, you're like, yes, I've dealt with this before. This is probably the right way to
Yeah.
go.
The other thing that I observe in leadership and in your leadership in particular with regard to confidence is people like to and tend to follow leaders who are confident, who know where they're going, who have principles, who are leading with intention, who are willing to demonstrate bravery and that they want to follow. And what I've observed in you and what I see in other really good leaders is that confidence creates followership and it creates a sense of team and it creates a sense of purpose and direction that is important if you're going to be effective in a very difficult environment.
I would agree with that. I've been very lucky. Actually, ever since I became a CNO, I've had a long track record of keeping my leaders. So, in this very complicated environment that I'm in, I have 12 directors and chief nurses, and they're virtually the same group that was here when I started 6 years ago. And we've been through some very, very challenging times.
Yeah, and that doesn't happen by accident. And that's a tribute to, strong leadership and, good team building, obviously. So, all right, well, let's talk about your team and where and how transparency and vulnerability come into play. Maybe it's a decision within the organization or a personal issue. How do you navigate that with your team?
Yeah. For my own personal issues, those don't ever come to work. I mean, I talk about my kids or my dogs or those kinds of things, but I've always said there's enough drama at work that I have no drama at home.
Gotcha.
But I think as far as transparency, I've had this relationship and everywhere I've been a chief nurse is really, I'm going to tell you everything that I know unless I've been told I can't. People need to understand what's coming because if they don't understand what's happening, they make up their own reality. And I think fact is far better than whatever fiction they're going to come up with. So, are there times you have to do really hard things? Absolutely. And what I have found for me is the best way to approach that. First, I have to get right with it. I may not like it. I may be very angry or upset, but I have to make my peace with it and then talk to my team about it and give them that same opportunity to rail against it or why it's so unfair or this is not going to work. And then at the end of letting them talk through it, and sometimes it's that day, sometimes it's a day or so afterwards, is okay, we have to operationalize this. How are we going to do it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where everybody, takes off the gloves and says, okay, what can we do differently? How can we think about it differently? How can we problem solve this? And I think allowing them that opportunity to be angry about it and to give respect to their feelings and how they're trying to deal with it also gives them trust that we're going to be able to work it out together.
Yeah. So those difficult decisions or things that come down from above that you just don't agree with. You've said your piece at your level and nothing's changing. We're going forward. It's moving forward. How do you deal with that transparently with your team? Do you share your frustration or do you just sort of say, well, here's the way it is?
No, they know I'm frustrated as well.
Yeah.
We
And
commingle our
you're a
frustration.
lot of things, but you're not a poker player.
Oh gosh, no, I have 0 poker face, and so I just have to be me, and they know that, and I think they appreciate that because it doesn't come across as genuine if they know you're upset, but you
Yeah.
you won't say it.
Yep.
I mean, sometimes things just have to happen because it may not be the decision that the senior leadership wants to make either.
Yeah. Yeah.
But oftentimes you're in between a really hard decision and an even harder decision. And
Yes.
so they're trying to do the best thing that they can with the knowledge that they have at the time.
Yeah. And I really love what you said about, all right, so it's a tough decision, or it's not the decision you would have made, but let's circle the wagons. We have to implement it. Let's get on board. Let's not rail against it constantly. Let's not continue to complain or whine about it. There's a time for that. Get it out of your system, but then we have to figure out how to move on. All right. Well, as we wrap up here our conversation, is there a leadership thought or anything you'd like to leave with the audience based on your background and experience over a few decades, I guess, close to, of leadership?
This is my 40th year of practice. I'll be 41 years as a nurse in December.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
So, parting thoughts. I love sports. So, I'm not very athletic at all, but I like to watch sports. And so, especially like football, basketball, even golf. But I think leadership is really a team sport.
Yes.
In my team, I see myself much more as the coach than I do anything else. So, I don't like to be micromanaged at all. I absolutely hate it. And I don't have the time or energy to micromanage other people. So, like with my teams, I really empower them to run their businesses, and down to my nurse managers, all run multi-million-dollar businesses
Yeah, they do.
in each of their departments. So, I want to give them the tools and the equipment and the know-how to be able to be successful, and know that I'm here if you need me, but I'm not going to be popping into your business every day to ask you how things are going. It's there to be helpful, but not to micromanage. And I think lean on your resources. Smart leaders surround themselves with as many smart people as they can find. I don't ever think I'm the smartest person in the room. I might be the loudest, but I'm maybe not the smartest. But it's having those other people who could see it from different angles and help us all come to a better outcome. I learned this was in my first CNO job. We were redoing our model, and I had staff nurses, RNs, LPNs, nursing assistants, and a couple of clinical nurse specialists who were helping do this project. And when we got to the point where we actually were designing what the model was going to look like, I recused myself because I said, I've been in situations where the chief nurse is in the room and nobody says what they think or really puts themselves out there because they keep looking to the chief nurse to see what do they like that? Do they not like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so trusting that other people have good ideas. I mean, that group came up with something much better than I would have ever come up with, or if I'd been in the room would have come up with. So I think you have to trust your team.
Yeah, very well said. I love the coaching analogy, the sports analogy. So let me ask you one other thing about that. So if you see yourself as the coach and you're thinking about a sports analogy, how do you know if your team is winning or losing?
I would say probably my biggest measure of winning or losing is when I walk around the buildings, how are people responding? So I've worked in 6 different systems, a number of them unionized. I can walk around any of the buildings and you can just feel it from the team about the camaraderie and the cohesiveness and their focus on the patient and their team as being the utmost importance. And I do something that's a little bit more structured on Tuesday afternoons. I take a couple of our other leadership folks out with me, and we do something called Senior Leader Safety and Snacks, where I bribe people with cookies so that they'll come talk to us, and we come out. I go armed with understanding some important things to that unit to be able to brag them up, because achieving those kinds of outcomes and those kinds of safety outcomes is hard. I always ask them, what's your secret sauce? What's the thing that makes this unit different? 100% of the time, the first or second answer is teamwork. And I think that you can't buy that. On Monday, I met with 2 nurse managers who just started with the company in the last month and came from different systems. And they both talked about, like, you feel it. You feel it in the team. You feel it in the building. You feel it in how people work together. I mean, that's that team sport. It
Yeah.
takes everybody.
Yeah. And from a coaching perspective, lots of coaches are great with tactics and X's and O's and the specifics of how we're going to run this play or run this. But really, the guys that win are the ones that invest in the team, the culture, the environment, the intangibles that, like you said, don't show up on a a KPI, aren't a performance indicator necessarily. Those things follow when you have a collaborative environment where people are doing the right things for the right reasons. And as a coach, as a leader, from your perspective, I think that's what makes you a winner.
Well, thanks, Al.
Yeah.
I
Well,
like to
thanks for
that's my informal motto is I like to win.
yeah, there you go. Well, thanks for joining me, Loraine. It's been a pleasure to have you, and all the best along the way. Thank you.
Thanks, Al.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Thanks for listening. Leadership is rarely simple and it's rarely easy, and that's exactly why it matters. My hope is that something from today's conversation gave you a moment to pause, reflect, or see your leadership in a new way. Until next time, lead well.